Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me echo what's already been said. And you all are extremely qualified. I can't think of individuals who are better equipped to serve in the post for which you're here this morning. And I want to thank you for that service, and also add my appreciation to your families for the sacrifice that they make each and every day, so that you can continue to serve our country with such distinction. I also want to associate myself with the remarks that were made by Senator Lieberman earlier, and also Senator Inhofe, with regard to the third site in Europe and the danger imposed by the Iranian threat. And Admiral Stavridis, you have made some fairly strong comments in that regard, and I also want to express my support for that view, and I think it's just really important that we continue to pursue that undertaking. Let me, General McChrystal, if I might, the core goal of the new sort of AFPAC strategy is to destroy the extremists and their safe havens within both Pakistan and Afghanistan. And it would you would imply from that, I think, that it's not necessary to form a coalition government or a reconciliation of political elements in Afghanistan, as General Petraeus did in Iraq. It seems rather the goal requires only that an agreement be reached with the Taliban to block al-Qaeda operations in Afghanistan. And my question is it acceptable in your opinion to have the Taliban once again in charge of Afghanistan if they agree to deny al-Qaeda safe haven in Afghanistan?
Senator, I find it very unlikely that the Taliban would make a credible agreement to do that, and so I would have a difficult time even speculating. That said, I think that the President's intent and my belief is that we need to create in Afghanistan a state that would not allow the return of safe havens. In my view, I think that means it's going to have to be a government that is, it may be a working coalition that may have some former Taliban, but right now, based upon Taliban statements, I can't see them being a credible official part of the government.
The Washington Post report on April 29th that Pakistan's inability to slow Taliban advances has forced the administration to shift its Afghan-Pakistan strategy from a step-by-step process of greater engagement with Pakistan to a more accelerated approach. And I guess I'd be interested in knowing what that shift in strategy will do in terms of affecting your job in Afghanistan.
So I actually think it's positive. I think the degree to which Pakistan shows the resolve which they have shown lately, and their willingness to go after what they view as an important internal problem and let us partner and help them in any way possible, I think that's positive. And if we can in good faith do that, I think we continue to build a strategic partnership that I think is important for the long haul.
I'd like to get at one other issue, and again I'd address this to General McChrystal, dealing with the issue of corruption in Afghanistan. There's, of course, a lot been written about it. According to Sarah Shays, who operates an economic cooperative in Kandahar and appeared as a witness before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee earlier this year, corruption is so widespread that nearly every citizen interaction with the government results in some form of shakedown. And traveling along the roadways requires one to pay a bribe at each police checkpoint. According to Ms. Shays, and I quote, "To pay your electricity bill, you have to go to 8 different desks in 2 different buildings, and you have to pay bribes in order to have the privilege of paying your electricity bill," end quote. This sort of unchecked, dishonest form of governance, I think, really is obstructing our progress in Afghanistan. And as she has noted, people in some cases prefer probably to live under the Taliban, because of the excruciating difficulty that they encounter with the corruption in the government. And in fact, I think that's what brought the Taliban to power back in 1994. So I guess my question is, if we don't work to clean up the corruption in the Afghan government, we may not be able to win this war. And the question is, what, if confirmed, can you do in terms of taking steps that would implement our new strategy there that would lead to more honest government and end some of this corruption that is really plaguing the government and our ability, I think, to be successful there.
So I concur with what both Sarah told you and also what you've stated in terms of corruption. I think it has a corrosive effect that undermines the legitimacy of any government, particularly in Afghanistan right now, where it is a real problem and is perceived by the people to be a real problem. So I think we need to help them at every level, partnering with them to try to work out corruption. I don't think there's a way we can suddenly take a society that, after 30 years of war, has developed some bad habits and wring it out suddenly. But I do think constant pressure on it at the ministerial level, and I would look to partner with Ambassador Eikenberry and his team to try to provide people at each level to work, and then out more locally, things like PRTs and our forces, to put pressure on it to try to reduce it. I think it's one of the things that must be reduced for the government to be legitimate and therefore for the people to trust it.
Do you see us having any kind of success there long-term, absent functioning, and clean's probably too much of a word to use, but at least a capable, accountable, and at least effective government in that country?
No, sir. It may not look exactly like a structure of our government, but it has to be functioning and has to be perceived by the people as legitimate.
Okay. I want to come back to one other question I think that was asked earlier by Senator Reid, and it has to do with the issue of the command structure there and how I think that sometimes has hampered our efforts as well. And critics often point out that part of the problem in Afghanistan is the lack of unified effort among our allies, and that we managed to cripple our effort because there's not broad coordination or vision, and there's confusion about strategy and tactics and operations and those sorts of things. So, and you've touched on this already. I would direct this to you, General, and to Admiral Stavridis as well, about what can be done to establish a more unified effort, especially as we contemplate porting more troops into Afghanistan.
So I think the first point I'd make is it's not as clean and as unified as we might like. On the other hand, the nature of coalition warfare is such that you bring a number of partners together with different values, different goals, different habits, and you get them to work together. At the end of the day, I think you have to judge whether you get more from fighting as a coalition than you give up by not having unity. I think historically, and I believe strongly, we get more out of being a coalition, and it's sort of like democracy. You pay for a certain lack of order, but the benefits are so great. I think what we've got to do is work through it by over-communicating, just constantly staying wired. And there are probably some things we can do, as I mentioned, with the aspiration for General Rodriguez's role, that would make us more effective.
I would agree, and I would add that the command relationships are complicated, but they are not in any sense unworkable. And I believe that the communication and indeed the friendship between myself, General McChrystal, General Petraeus, Ambassador Eikenberry, all of us well known to each other, will be very effective in then turning and working with our allies to try and create a holistic approach, a palette upon which we can all paint our different pictures and yet have it come out as the picture we want.
In your efforts with our allies.
Excuse me for interrupting, Senator Thune. I'm going to run and vote now. A vote has begun after you. Senator Akaka would be next, and he will then identify whoever else is here. Thank you. Excuse the interruption.
The one final point I want to make on that is in your efforts to, as you strengthen and build some of those relationships with our allies, this issue of caveats is really problematic. And if you talk to troops or commanders, it continually comes up. And it really does undermine and hamstring our ability to be effective. And I understand there are certain, as you noted, limitations when you're dealing with a coalition effort like this. But I really hope that you all can home in on that and see if perhaps we can't provide some relief from some of these the conditions and caveats that some of our allies impose on our ability to get the job done.
Sir, if I could, we spoke earlier about the importance of these omelets, these teams that we're going to try and bring together, and that's kind of at the very top of the priority list for me. I would say caveats would be the next. I sat down in the course of preparing for this hearing and read every one of the 69 caveats that apply to the various nations involved in this. It is complicated. It's worth mentioning 18 of the 42 countries are caveat-free. So there are examples amongst the coalition of nations who do not place caveats upon themselves. And so I think by working with our allies, and again, as we've talked about, trying to find where the absolute red lines are, but getting close and close and closer to those every day will reduce the caveats. And again, that's, I think, an area where Stan and I will be working very closely together. Sir, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you all very much, and Mr. Chairman, thank you.